Chapter 49. Jason. Jason had heard of someone's life flashing before his eyes, but he didn't think it would be like this. Standing with his friends in a defensive ring, surrounded by giants, then looking up at an impossible vision in the sky, Jason could very clearly picture himself 50 years in the future. He was sitting in a rocking chair on the front porch of a house on the California coast. Piper was serving lemonade. Her hair was grey, deep lines etched the corners of her eyes, but she was still as beautiful as ever. Jason's grandchildren sat around his feet, and he was trying to explain to them what had happened on this day in Athens. "No, I'm serious," he said. "Just 6 demigods on the ground and one more in a burning ship above the Acropolis. We were surrounded by 30-foot-tall giants who were about to kill us. Then the sky opened up, and the gods descended." "Grandad," the kids said, "you're full of shit." "I'm not kidding," he protested. "The Olympian gods came charging out of the heavens on their war chariots, trumpets blaring, swords flaming, and your great-grandfather, the king of the gods, led the charge, a javelin of pure electricity crackling in his hand." His grandkids laughed at him, and Piper glanced over, smiling, like, would you believe it, if you hadn't been there? But Jason was there. He looked up as the clouds parted over the Acropolis, and he almost doubted the new prescription lenses Asclepius had given him. Instead of blue skies, he saw black space spangled with stars, the palaces of Mount Olympus gleaming silver and gold in the background, and an army of gods charging down from on high. It was too much to process, and it was probably better for his health that he didn't see it all. Only later would Jason be able to remember bits and pieces. There was supersized Jupiter. No, this was Zeus, his original form, riding into battle in a golden chariot, a lightning bolt the size of a telephone pole crackling in one hand. Pulling his chariot were 4 horses made of wind, each constantly shifting from equine to human form, trying to break free. For a split second, one took on the icy visage of Boreas. Another wore Notus's swirling crown of fire and steam. A third flashed the smug, lazy smile of Zephyrus. Zeus had bound and harnessed the 4 wind gods themselves. On the underbelly of the Argo II, the glass bay doors split open. The goddess Nike tumbled out, free from her golden net. She spread her glittering wings and soared to Zeus's side, taking her rightful place as his charioteer. "My mind is restored," she roared. "Victory to the gods!" At Zeus's left flank rode Hera, her chariot pulled by enormous peacocks, their rainbow-coloured plumage so bright it gave Jason the spins. Ares bellowed with glee as he thundered down on the back of a fire-breathing horse, his spear glistening red. In the last second before the gods reached the Parthenon, they seemed to displace themselves, like they jumped through hyperspace. The chariots disappeared. Suddenly Jason and his friends were surrounded by the Olympians, now human-sized, tiny next to the giants, but glowing with power. Jason shouted and charged Porphyrion. His friends joined in the carnage. The fighting ranged all over the Parthenon and spilled across the Acropolis. Out of the corner of his eye, Jason saw Annabeth fighting Enceladus. At her side stood a woman with long dark hair and golden armour over her white robes. The goddess thrust her spear at the giant, then brandished her shield with the fearsome bronze visage of Medusa. Together, Athena and Annabeth drove Enceladus back into the nearest wall of metal scaffolding, which collapsed on top of him. On the opposite side of the temple, Frank Zhang and the god Ares smashed through the entire phalanx of giants, Ares with his spear and shield, Frank as an African elephant with his trunk and feet. The war god laughed and stabbed and disemboweled like a kid destroying piñatas. Hazel raced through the battle on Arion's back, disappearing in the mist whenever a giant came close, then appearing behind him and stabbing him in the back. The goddess Hecate danced in her wake, setting fire to their enemies with 2 blazing torches. Jason didn't see Hades, but whenever a giant stumbled and fell, the ground broke open and the giant was snapped up and swallowed. Percy battled the giant twins, Otis and Ephialtes, while at his side fought a bearded man with a trident and a loud Hawaiian shirt. The twin giants stumbled, Poseidon's trident morphed into a fire hose, and the gods sprayed the giants out of the Parthenon with a high-powered blast in the shape of wild horses. Piper was maybe the most impressive. She fenced with the giantess Periboea, sword against sword. Despite the fact that her opponent was 5 times larger, Piper seemed to be holding her own. The goddess Aphrodite floated around them in a small white cloud, stewing rose petals in the giantess's eyes and calling encouragement to Piper. "Lovely, my dear. Yes, good. Hit her again." Whenever Periboea tried to strike, doves rose up from nowhere and fluttered in the giantess's face. As for Leo, he was racing across the deck of the Argo too, shooting ballistae, dropping hammers on the giants' heads and blow-torching their loincloths. Behind him at the helm, a burly, bearded guy in a mechanic's uniform was tinkering with the controls, furiously trying to keep the ship aloft. The strangest sight was the old giant Toon, who was getting bludgeoned to death by 3 old ladies with brass clubs, the Fates, armed for war. Jason decided there was nothing in the world scarier than a gang of bat-wielding grannies. He noticed all of these things and a dozen other melees in progress, but most of his attention was fixed on the enemy before him, Porphyrion, the giant king, and on the god who fought by Jason's side, Zeus. My father, Jason thought in disbelief. Porphyrion didn't give him much chance to savour the moment. The giant used his spear in a whirlwind of swipes, jabs and slashes. It was all Jason could do to stay alive. Still, Zeus's presence felt reassuringly familiar. Even though Jason had never met his father, he was reminded of all his happiest moments, his birthday picnic with Piper in Rome, the day Lupa showed him Camp Jupiter for the first time, his games of hide-and-seek with Thalia in their apartment when he was tiny, an afternoon on the beach when his mother had picked him up, kissed him, and showed him an oncoming storm. Never be afraid of a thunderstorm, Jason. That is your father, letting you know he loves you. Zeus smelled of rain and clean wind. He made the air burn with energy. Up close his lightning bolt appeared as a bronze rod, 1 metre long, pointed at both ends, with blades of energy extending from both sides to form a javelin of white electricity. He slashed across the giant's path, and Porphyrion collapsed into his makeshift throne, which crumbled under the giant's weight. "No throne for you," Zeus growled. "Not here. Not ever." "You cannot stop us," the giant yelled. "It is done. The Earth Mother is awake." In answer, Zeus blasted the throne to rubble. The giant king flew backwards out of the temple and Jason ran after him, his father at his heels. They backed Porphyrion to the edge of the cliffs. The whole of modern Athens spread out below. Lightning had melted all the weapons in the giant's hair. Molten celestial bronze dripped through his dreadlocks like caramel. His skin steamed and blistered. Porphyrion snarled and raised his spear. "Your cause is lost, Zeus. Even if you defeat me, the Earth Mother shall simply raise me again." "Then perhaps," Zeus said, "you should not die in the embrace of Gaia. Jason, my son." Jason had never felt so good, so recognised as when his father said his name. It was like last winter at Camp Half-Blood, when his erased memories had finally returned. Jason suddenly understood another layer of his existence, a part of his identity that had been cloudy before. Now he had no doubt. He was the son of Jupiter, god of the sky. He was his father's child. Jason advanced. Porphyrion lashed out wildly with his spear, but Jason cut it in half with his gladius. He charged in, jabbing his sword through the giant's breastplate, then summoned the winds and blasted Porphyrion off the edge of the cliff. As the giant fell, screaming, Zeus pointed his lightning bolt. An arc of pure white heat vaporized Porphyrion in midair. His ashes drifted down in a gentle cloud, dusting the tops of the olive trees on the slopes of the Acropolis. Zeus turned to Jason. His lightning bolt flickered off, and Zeus clipped the celestial bronze rod to his belt. The god's eyes were stormy grey. His salt and pepper hair and his beard looked like stratus clouds. Jason found it strange that the Lord of the Universe, King of Olympus, was only a few inches taller than he was. "My son." Zeus clasped Jason's shoulder. "There is so much I would like to tell you." The god took a heavy breath, making the air crackle and Jason's new glasses fog up. "Alas, as king of the gods, I must not show favoritism to my children. When we return to the other Olympians, I will not be able to praise you as much as I would like, or give you as much credit as you deserve." "I don't want praise." Jason's voice quavered. "Just a little time together would be nice. I mean, I don't even know you." Zeus's gaze was as far away as the ozone layer. "I am always with you, Jason. I have watched your progress with pride, but it will never be possible for us to be—" He curled his fingers as if trying to pluck the right words out of the air. "Close, normal, a true father and son. From birth, you were destined to be hearers, to appease her wrath. Even your name, Jason, was her choice. You did not ask for this. I did not want it. But when I gave you over to her, I had no idea what a good man you would become. Your journey has shaped you, made you both kind and great. Whatever happens when we return to the Parthenon, know that I do not hold you accountable. You have proven yourself a true hero." Jason's emotions were a jumble in his chest. "What do you mean? Whatever happens?" "The worst is not over," Zeus warned, "and someone must take the blame for what has happened." Come. Chapter 50. Jason. Nothing was left on the giants except heaps of ash, a few spears and some burning dreadlocks. The Argo too was still aloft, barely, moored to the top of the Parthenon. Half the ship's oars were broken off or tangled. Smoke steamed and streamed from several large splits in the hull. The sails were peppered with burning holes. Leo looked almost as bad. He stood in the midst of the temple with the other crew members, his face covered in soot, his clothes smouldering. The gods fanned out in a semicircle as Zeus approached. None of them seemed particularly joyful about their victory. Apollo and Artemis stood together in the shadow of a column, as if trying to hide. Hera and Poseidon were having an intense discussion with another goddess in green and gold robes, perhaps Demeter. Nike tried to put a golden laurel wreath on Hecate's head, but the goddess of magic swatted it away. Hermes sneaked close to Athena, attempted to put his arm around her. Athena turned her Aegis shield his way, and Hermes scuffled off. The only Olympian who seemed in a good mood was Ares. He laughed and pantomimed gutting an enemy, while Frank listened, his expression polite but queasy. "Brethren," Zeus said, "we are healed, thanks to the work of these demigods. The Athena Parthenos, which once stood in this temple, now stands at Camp Half-Blood. It has united our offspring, and thus our own essences." "Lord Zeus," Piper spoke up. "Is Rayner okay? Nico and Coach Hedge?" Jason couldn't quite believe Piper was asking after Rayner's health, but it made him glad. Zeus knitted his cloud-coloured eyebrows. "They succeeded in their mission. As of this moment they are alive, whether or not they are okay." "There is still work to be done," Queen Hera interrupted. She spread her arms like she wanted a group hug. "But my heroes, you have triumphed over the giants as I knew you would. My plan succeeded beautifully." Zeus turned on his wife. Thunder shook the Acropolis. "Hera, do not dare take credit. You have caused at least as many problems as you've fixed." The Queen of Heaven blanched. "Husband, surely you see now this was the only way." "There is never only one way," Zeus bellowed. "That is why there are 3 fates, not one. Is this not so?" By the ruins of the giant king's throne, the 3 old ladies silently bowed their heads in recognition. Jason noticed that the other gods stayed well away from the fates and their gleaming brass clubs. "Please, husband." Hera tried for a smile, but she was so clearly frightened that Jason almost felt sorry for her. "I only did what I—" "Silence!" Zeus snapped. "You disobeyed my orders. Nevertheless, I recognize that you acted with honest intentions. The valor of those 7 heroes has proven that you were not entirely without wisdom." Hera looked like she wanted to argue, but she kept her mouth shut. "Apollo, however." Zeus glared into the shadows where the twins were standing. "My son, come here." Apollo inched forward like he was walking the plank. He looked so much like a teenage demigod, it was unnerving. No more than 17, wearing jeans and a Camp Half-Blood t-shirt, with a bow over his shoulder and a sword at his belt. With his tousled blonde hair and blue eyes, he might have been Jason's brother, on the mortal side as well as the godly side. Jason wondered if Apollo had assumed this form to be inconspicuous, or to look pitiable to his father. The fear in Apollo's face certainly looked real, and also very human. The 3 fates gathered around the god, circling him, their withered hands raised. "Twice you have defied me," Zeus said. Apollo moistened his lips. My lord, you neglected your duties. You succumbed to flattery and vanity. You encouraged your descendant Octavian to follow his dangerous path, and you prematurely revealed a prophecy that may yet destroy us all. But enough, Zeus boomed. We will speak of your punishment later. For now, you will wait on Olympus. Zeus flicked his hand and Apollo turned into a cloud of glitter. The fates swirled around him, dissolving into air, and the glittery whirlwind shot into the sky. "What will happen to him?" Jason asked. The gods stared at him, but Jason didn't care. Having actually met Zeus, he had newfound sympathy for Apollo. "It is not your concern," Zeus said. "We have other problems to address." An uncomfortable silence settled over the Parthenon. It didn't feel right to let the matter go. Jason didn't see how Apollo deserved to be singled out for punishment. "Someone must take the blame," Zeus had said. "But why?" "Father," Jason said, "I made a vow to honour all the gods. I promised Cymopleia, but that once this war is over, none of the gods would be without shrines at the camps." Zeus scowled. "That's fine, but Kim who?" Poseidon coughed into his fist. She's one of mine." "My point," Jason said, "is that blaming each other isn't going to solve anything. That's how the Romans and Greeks got divided in the first place." The air became dangerously ionized. Jason's scalp tingled. He realized he was risking his father's wrath. He might get turned into glitter or blasted off the Acropolis. He'd known his dad for 5 minutes and made a good impression. Now he was throwing it away. A good Roman wouldn't keep talking. Jason kept talking. Apollo wasn't the problem. To punish him for Gaia waking is... He wanted to say stupid, but he caught himself. Unwise. Unwise? Zeus's voice was almost a whisper. Before the assembled gods, you would call me unwise? Jason's friends watched on full alert. Percy looked like he was ready to jump in and fight at his side. Then Artemis stepped out of the shadows. Father, this hero has fought long and hard for our cause. His nerves are frayed. We should take that into account. Jason started to protest, but Artemis stopped him with a glance. Her expression sent a message so clear she might have been speaking in his mind. Thank you, demigod, but do not press this. I will reason with Zeus when he is calmer. Surely, father, the goddess continued, we should attend to our more pressing problems, as you pointed out. Gaia, Annabeth chimed in, clearly anxious to change the topic. She's awake, isn't she? Zeus turned towards her. Around Jason, the air molecules stopped humming. His skull felt like it had just come out of the microwave. That is correct, Zeus said. The blood of Olympus was spilled. She is fully conscious. Oh, come on, Percy complained. I get a little nosebleed and I wake up the entire earth? That's not fair. Athena shouldered her aegis. Complaining of unfairness is like assigning blame, Percy Jackson. It does no one any good. She gave Jason an approving glance. Now you must move quickly. Gaia rises to destroy your camp. Poseidon leaned on his trident. For once, Athena is right. For once, Athena protested. Why would Gaia be back at camp? Leo asked. Percy's nosebleed was here. Dude, Percy said. First off, you heard Athena. Don't blame my nose. Second, Gaia's the earth. She can pop up anywhere she wants. Besides, she told us she was going to do this. She said the first thing on her to-do list was destroying our camp. Question is, how do we stop her? Frank looked at Zeus. Sir, your majesty, can't you gods just pop over there with us? You've got the chariots and the magic powers and whatnot. Yes, Hazel said. We defeated the giants together in 2 seconds. Let's all go. No, Zeus said flatly. No, Jason asked. But father... Zeus's eyes sparkled with power, and Jason realized he'd pushed his dad as far as he could for today, and maybe for the next few centuries. That's the problem with prophecies, Zeus growled, when Apollo allowed the prophecy of 7 to be spoken, and when Hera took it upon herself to interpret the words. The fates wove the future in such a way that it had only so many possible outcomes, so many solutions. You 7, the demigods, are destined to defeat Gaia. We, the gods, cannot. I don't get it, Piper said. What's the point of being gods if you have to rely on puny mortals to do your bidding? All the gods exchanged dark looks. Aphrodite, however, laughed gently and kissed her daughter. My dear Piper, don't you think we've been asking ourselves that question for thousands of years? But it is what binds us together, keeps us eternal. We need you mortals as much as you need us. Annoying as that may be, it's the truth. Frank shuffled uncomfortably, like he missed being on an elephant. So, how can we possibly get to Camp Half-Blood in time to save it? It took us months to reach Greece. The winds, Jason said. Father, can't you unleash the winds to send our ship back? Zeus glowered. I could slap you back to Long Island. Was that a joke or a threat or... No, Zeus said. I mean it quite literally. I could slap your ship back to Camp Half-Blood, but the force involved. Over by the ruined giant throne, the grungy god in the mechanic's uniform shook his head. My boy Leo built a good ship, but it won't sustain that kind of stress. It would break apart as soon as it arrived, maybe sooner. Leo straightened his tool belt. The Argo 2 can make it. It only has to stay in one piece long enough to get us back home. Once there, we can abandon ship. Dangerous, warned Hephaestus. Perhaps fatal. The goddess Nike twirled a laurel wreath on her finger. Victory is always dangerous, and it often requires sacrifice. Leo Valdez and I have discussed this. She stared pointedly at Leo. Jason didn't like that at all. He remembered Asclepius's grim expression when the doctor had examined Leo. Oh, my. Oh, I see. Jason knew what they had to do to defeat Gaia. He knew the risks, but he wanted to take those risks himself, not put them on Leo. Piper will have the physician's cure, he told himself. She'll keep us both covered. Leo, Annabeth said. What is Nike talking about? Leo waved off the question. The usual. Victory, sacrifice, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't matter. We can do this, guys. We have to do this. A feeling of dread settled over Jason. Zeus was correct about one thing. The worst was yet to come. When the choice comes, notice the south wind had told him, storm or fire, do not despair. Jason made his choice. Leo's right. All aboard for one last trip. Chapter 51. Jason. So much for a tender farewell. The last Jason saw of his dad, Zeus was 100 feet tall, holding the Argo II by its prow. He boomed, "Hold on!" And then he tossed the ship up and spiked it overhand like a volleyball. If Jason hadn't been strapped to the mast with one of Leo's 20-point safety harnesses, he would have disintegrated. As it was, his stomach tried to stay behind in grease, and all the air was sucked out of his lungs. The sky turned black, the ship rattled and creaked, the deck cracked like thin ice under Jason's legs, and with a sonic boom, the Argo II hurtled out of the clouds. "Jason!" Leo shouted. "Hurry!" His fingers felt like melted plastic, but Jason managed to undo the straps. Leo was lashed to the control console, desperately trying to right the ship as they spiraled downward in freefall. The sails were on fire, Festus creaked in alarm, a catapult peeled away and lifted into the air. Centrifugal force sent the shields flying off the railings like metal frisbees. Wider cracks opened in the deck as Jason staggered towards the hold, using the winds to keep himself anchored. If he couldn't make it to the others. Then the hatch burst open. Frank and Hazel stumbled through, pulling on the guide rope they'd attached to the mast. Piper, Annabeth and Percy followed, all of them looking disoriented. "Go!" Leo yelled. "Go, go, go!" For once, Leo's tone was deadly serious. They talked through their evacuation plan, but that slap across the world had made Jason's mind sluggish. Judging from the others' expressions, they weren't in much better shape. Buford the table saved them. He clattered across the deck with his holographic hedge blaring, "Let's go! Move it! Cut that out!" Then his tabletop split into helicopter blades, and Buford buzzed away. Frank changed form. Instead of a dazed demigod, he was now a dazed grey dragon. Hazel climbed onto his neck. Frank grabbed Percy and Annabeth in his front claws, then spread his wings and soared away. Jason held Piper by the waist, ready to fly, but he made the mistake of glancing down. The view was a spinning kaleidoscope of sky, earth, sky, earth. The ground was getting awfully close. "Leo, you won't make it," Jason shouted. "Come with us." "No, get out of here." "Leo," Piper tried, "please, save your charm speak pipes. I told you, I've got a plan. Now shoo." Jason took a last look at the splintering ship. The Argo II had been their home for so long. Now they were abandoning it, for good, and leaving Leo behind. Jason hated it, but he saw the determination in Leo's eyes. Just like the visit with his father, Zeus, there was no time for a proper goodbye. Jason harnessed the winds, and he and Piper shot into the sky. The ground wasn't much less chaotic. As they plummeted, Jason saw a vast army of monsters spread across the hills. Cynophalae, two-headed men, wild centaurs, ogres and others he couldn't even name, surrounding two tiny islands of demigods. At the crest of Half-Blood Hill, gathered at the feet of the Athena Parthenos, was the main force of Camp Half-Blood, along with the 1st and 5th cohorts, rallied around the Golden Eagle of the Legion. The other 3 Roman cohorts were in a defensive formation several hundred yards away, seemed to be taking the brunt of the attack. Giant eagles circled Jason, screeching urgently, as if looking for orders. Frank, the grey dragon, flew alongside with his passengers. "Hazel," Jason yelled, "those 3 cohorts are in trouble. If they don't merge with the rest of the demigods." "On it," Hazel said. "Go, Frank." Dragon Frank veered to the left, with Annabeth in one claw yelling, "Let's get 'em!" and Percy in the other claw screaming, "I hate flying!" Piper and Jason veered right towards the summit of Half-Blood Hill. Jason's heart lifted when he saw Nico D'Angelo on the front lines with the Greeks, slashing his way through a crowd of two-headed men. A few feet away, Rhena sat astride a new Pegasus, her sword drawn. She shouted orders at the Legion, and the Romans obeyed without question, as if she'd never been away. Jason didn't see Octavian anywhere. Good. Neither did he see a colossal earth goddess laying waste to the world. Very good. Perhaps Gaia had risen, taken one look at the modern world and decided to go back to sleep. Jason wished they could be that lucky, but he doubted it. He and Piper landed on the hill, their swords drawn, and a cheer went up from the Greeks and the Romans. "About time," Rhena called. "Glad you could join us." With a start, Jason realised she was addressing Piper, not him. Piper grinned. "We had some giants to kill." Excellent, Raina returned the smile. Help yourself to some barbarians. Why, thank you. The two girls launched into battle side by side. Nico nodded to Jason as if they'd just seen each other 5 minutes ago, then went back to turning two-headed men into no-headed corpses. Good timing, where's the ship? Jason pointed. The Argo 2 streaked across the sky in a ball of fire, shedding burning chunks of mast, hull and armament. Jason didn't see how even fireproof Leo could survive in that inferno, but he had to hope. Gods, Nico said. Is everyone okay? Leo. Jason's voice broke. He said he had a plan. The comet disappeared behind the western hills. Jason waited with dread for the sound of an explosion, but he heard nothing over the roar of battle. Nico met his eyes. He'll be fine. Sure, but just in case. For Leo. For Leo, Jason agreed, and they charged into the fight. Jason's anger gave him renewed strength. The Greeks and Romans slowly pushed back the enemies. Wild centaurs toppled. Wolf-headed men howled as they were cut to ashes. More monsters kept appearing. Carpoi, grain spirits, swirling out of the grass. Griffins diving from the sky. Lumpy clay humanoids that made Jason think of evil Play-Doh men. They're ghosts with earthen shells, Nico warned. Don't let them hit you. Obviously Gaia had kept some surprises in reserve. At one point, Will Solis, the lead camper for Apollo, ran up to Nico and said something in his ear. Over the yelling and clashing of blades, Jason couldn't hear the words. Jason, I have to go, Nico said. Jason didn't really understand, but he nodded, and Will and Nico dashed off into the fray. A moment later, a squad of Hermes campers gathered around Jason for no apparent reason. Connor Stoll grinned. What's up, Grace? I'm good, Jason said. You? Connor dodged an ogre club and stabbed a grain spirit, which exploded in a cloud of wheat. Yeah, can't complain. Nice day for it. Raina yelled. Hercula Flammas! And a wave of flaming arrows arced over the legion's shield wall, destroying a platoon of ogres. The Roman ranks moved forward, impaling centaurs and trampling wounded ogres under their bronze-tipped boots. Somewhere downhill, Jason heard Frank Zhang yell in Latin, Repella equitus! A massive herd of centaurs parted in panic as the legion's other 3 cohorts ploughed through in perfect formation, their spears bright with monster blood. Frank marched before them, on the left flank, riding Arion. Hazel beamed with pride. Ave, Praetor Zhang, Raina called. Ave, Praetor Ramirez Arellano, Frank said. Let's do this. Legion, close ranks. A cheer went up among the Romans as the 5 cohorts melded into one massive killing machine. Frank pointed his sword forward, and from the Golden Eagle standard, tendrils of lightning swept across the enemy, turning several hundred monsters to toast. Legion, cunam formate, Raina yelled. Advance! Another cheer on Jason's right as Percy and Annabeth reunited with the forces of Camp Half-Blood. Greeks, Percy yelled. Let's, fight stuff. They yelled like banshees and charged. Jason grinned. He loved the Greeks. They had no organisation whatsoever, but they made up for it with enthusiasm. Jason was feeling good about the battle, except for 2 big questions. Where was Leo? And where was Gaia? Unfortunately, he got the second answer fast and first. Under his feet, the earth rippled as if Half-Blood Hill had become a giant water mattress. Demigods fell, ogres slipped, centaurs charged face first into the grass. Awake! A voice boomed all around them. 100 yards away, at the crest of the next hill, the grass and soil swirled upward like the point of a massive drill. The column of earth thickened into the 20-foot-tall figure of a woman. Her dress woven from blades of grass, her skin as white as quartz, her hair brown and tangled like tree roots. Little fools! Gaia, the Earth Mother, opened her pure green eyes. The paltry magic of your statue cannot contain me. As she said it, Jason realised why Gaia hadn't appeared until now. The Athena Parthenos had been protecting the demigods, holding back the wrath of the earth. But even Athena's might could only last so long against a primordial goddess. Fear as palpable as a cold front washed over the demigod army. Stand fast, Piper shouted, her charm speak clear and loud. Greeks and Romans, we can fight her together. Gaia laughed. She spread her arms and the earth bent towards her, trees tilting, bedrock groaning, soil rippling in waves. Jason rose on the wind, but all around him monsters and demigods alike started to sink into the ground. One of Octavian's onagers capsized and disappeared into the side of the hill. The whole earth is my body, Gaia boomed. How would you fight the goddess of In a flash of bronze, Gaia was swept off the hillside, snarled in the claws of a 50-ton metal dragon. Festus, reborn, rose into the sky on gleaming wings, spewing fire from his maw triumphantly. As he ascended, the rider on his back got smaller and more difficult to discern, but Leo's grin was unmistakable. "Pipes! Jason!" he shouted down. "You coming? The fight is up here." Chapter 52. Jason. As soon as Gaia achieved liftoff, the ground solidified. Demigods stopped sinking, though many were still buried up to their waists. Sadly, the monsters seemed to be digging themselves out more quickly. They charged the Greek and Roman ranks, taking advantage of the demigods' disorganization. Jason put his arms around Piper's waist. He was about to take off when Percy yelled, "Wait! Frank can fly the rest of us up there. We can all—" "No, man," Jason said. "They need you here. There's still an army to defeat. Besides, the prophecy." "He's right." Frank gripped Percy's arm. "You have to let them do this, Percy. It's like Annabeth's quest in Rome, or Hazel at the doors of death. This part can only be them." Percy obviously didn't like it, but at that moment a flood of monsters swept over the Greek forces. Annabeth called to him, "Hey, problem over here!" Percy ran to join her. Frank and Hazel turned to Jason. They raised their arms in the Roman salute, then ran off to regroup the legion. Jason and Piper spiraled upward on the wind. "I've got the cure," Piper murmured like a chant. "It'll be fine. I've got the cure." Jason realized she'd lost her sword somehow during the battle, but he doubted it would matter. Against Gaia, a sword would do no good. This was about storm and fire, a third power, Piper's charm speak, which would hold them together. Last winter, Piper had slowed the power of Gaia at the Wolf House, helping to free Hera from a cage of earth. Now she would have an even bigger job. As they ascended, Jason gathered the wind and clouds around him. The sky responded with frightening speed. Soon they were in the eye of a maelstrom. Lightning burned his eyes. Thunder made his teeth vibrate. Directly above them, Festus grappled with the earth goddess. Gaia kept disintegrating, trying to trickle back to the ground, but the winds kept her aloft. Festus sprayed her with flames, which seemed to force her into solid form. Meanwhile, from Festus's back, Leo blasted the goddess with flames of his own and hurled insults. "Potty sludge, dirt face! This is for my mother, Esperanza Valdez!" His whole body was wreathed in fire. Rain hung in the stormy air, but only sizzled and steamed around him. Jason zoomed towards them. Gaia turned into loose white sand, but Jason summoned a squadron of Venti, who churned around her, constraining her into a cocoon of wind. Gaia fought back. When she wasn't disintegrating, she lashed out with shrapnel blasts of stone and soil that Jason barely deflected. Stoking the storm, containing Gaia, keeping himself and Piper aloft, Jason had never done anything so difficult. He felt like he was covered in lead weights, trying to swim with only his legs while holding a car over his head. But he had to keep Gaia off the ground. That was the secret Kim had hinted at when they spoke at the bottom of the sea. Long ago, Uranos, the sky god, had been tricked down to the earth by Gaia and the Titans. They'd held him on the ground so he couldn't escape, and with his powers weakened from being so far from his home territory, they'd been able to cut him apart. Now Jason, Leo and Piper had to reverse that scenario. They had to keep Gaia away from her source of power, the earth, and weaken her until she could be defeated. Together they rose. Festus creaked and groaned with the effort, but he continued to gain altitude. Jason still didn't understand how Leo had managed to remake the dragon. Then he recalled all the hours Leo had spent working inside the hull over the last few weeks. Leo must have been planning this all along and building a new body for Festus within the framework of the ship. He must have known in his guts that the Argo 2 would eventually fall apart, a ship turning into a dragon. Jason supposed it was no more amazing than the dragon turning into a suitcase back in Quebec. However, it had happened. Jason was elated to see their old friend in action once more. "You cannot defeat me." Gaia crumbled to sand, only to get blasted by more flames. Her body melted into a lump of glass, shattered, then reformed again as human. "I am eternal!" "Eternally annoying," Leo yelled, and he urged Festus higher. Jason and Piper rose with them. "Get me closer," Piper urged. "I need to be next to her." "Piper, the flames and the shrapnel." "I know." Jason moved in until they were right next to Gaia. The winds encased the goddess, keeping her solid, but it was all Jason could do to contain her blasts of sand and soil. Her eyes were solid green, like all nature had been condensed into a few spoonfuls of organic matter. "Foolish children!" Her face contorted with miniature earthquakes and mudslides. "You are so weary." Piper told the goddess, her voice radiating kindness and sympathy. Aeons of pain and disappointment weigh on you. Silence! The force of Gaia's anger was so great that Jason momentarily lost control of the wind. He would have dropped into freefall, but Festus caught him and Piper in the other huge claw. Amazingly, Piper kept her focus. Millennia of sorrow, she told Gaia. Your husband Uranus was abusive. Your grandchildren, the gods, overthrew your beloved children, the Titans. Your other children, the Cyclopses and the 100-handed ones, were thrown into Tartarus. You are so tired of heartache. Lies! Gaia crumbled into a tornado of soil and grass, but her essence seemed to churn more sluggishly. If they gained any more altitude, the air would be too thin to breathe. Jason would be too weak to control it. Piper's talk of exhaustion affected him too, sapping his strength, making his body feel heavy. What you want, Piper continued, more than victory, more than revenge. You want rest. You are so weary, so incomprehensibly tired of the ungrateful mortals and immortals. You do not speak for me, you cannot. You want one thing, Piper said soothingly, her voice resonating through Jason's bones. One word. You want permission to close your eyes and forget your troubles. You want sleep. Gaia solidified into human form. Her head lolled, her eyes closed, and she went limp in Festus's claw. Unfortunately, Jason started to black out too. The wind was dying. The storm dissipated. Dark spots danced in his eyes. Leo, Piper gasped for breath. We only have a few seconds. My charm speak won't. I know. Leo looked like he was made of fire. Flames rippled beneath his skin, illuminating his skull. Festus steamed and glowed, his claws burning through Jason's shirt. I can't contain the fire much longer. I'll vaporize her. Don't worry. But you guys need to leave. No, Jason said. We have to stay with you. Piper's got the cure. Leo, you can't. Hey. Leo grinned, which was unnerving in the flames, his teeth like molten silver ingots. I told you I had a plan. When are you going to trust me? And by the way, I love you guys. Festus's claw opened, and Jason and Piper fell. Jason had no strength to stop it. He held on to Piper as she cried Leo's name, and they plummeted earthwards. Festus became an indistinct ball of fire in the sky, a second sun, growing smaller and hotter. Then, in the corner of Jason's eye, a blazing comet streaked upward from the ground with a high-pitched, almost human scream. Just before Jason blacked out, the comet intercepted the ball of fire above them. The explosion turned the entire sky gold. Chapter 53. Nico. Nico had witnessed many forms of death. He didn't think anything could surprise him any more. He was wrong. In the middle of the battle, Will Solis ran up to him and said one word in his ear. Octavian. That got Nico's full attention. He had hesitated when he'd had the chance to kill Octavian, but there was no way Nico would let that scumbag augur escape justice. Where? Come on, Will said. Hurry. Nico turned to Jason, who was fighting next to him. Jason, I have to go. Then he plunged into the chaos, following Will. They passed Tyson and his Cyclopses, who were bellowing, bad dog, as they bashed the heads of the Cynophalae. Grover Underwood and a team of satyrs danced around with their panpipes, playing harmonies so dissonant that the earthen shell ghosts cracked apart. Travis Stoll ran past, arguing with his brother. What do you mean to set the landmines on the wrong hill? Nico and Will were halfway down the hill when the ground trembled under their feet. Like everyone else, monster and demigod alike, they froze in horror and watched as the whirling column of earth erupted from the top of the next hill, and Gaia appeared in all her glory. Then something large and bronze swooped out of the sky. Whoomph! Festus the bronze dragon snatched up the Earth Mother and soared away with her. What? How? Nico stammered. I don't know, Will said, but I doubt there's much we can do about that. We have other problems. Will sprinted towards the nearest onager. As they got closer, Nico spotted Octavian furiously readjusting the machine's targeting levers. The throwing arm was already primed with a full payload of imperial gold and explosives. The augur rushed about, tripping over gears and anchor spikes, fumbling with the ropes. Every so often he glanced up at Festus the dragon. Octavian! Nico yelled. The augur spun, then backed up against the huge sphere of ammunition. His fine purple robes snagged on the trigger rope, but Octavian didn't notice. Fumes from the payload curled about him as if drawn to the imperial gold jewellery around his arms and neck, the golden wreath in his hair. Oh, I see! Octavian's laughter was brittle and quite insane. Trying to steal my glory, eh? No, no, son of Pluto, I am the saviour of Rome. I was promised. Will raised his hands in a placating gesture. Octavian, get away from the onager. That isn't safe. Of course it's not. I will shoot Gaia down with this machine. Out of the corner of his eye, Nico saw Jason Grace rocket into the sky with Piper in his arms, flying straight towards Festus. Around the son of Jupiter, storm clouds gathered, swirling into a hurricane. Thunder boomed. You see? Octavian cried. The gold on his body was definitely smoking now, attracted to the catapult's payload like iron to a giant magnet. The gods approve of my actions. Jason is making that storm, Nico said. If you fire the onager, you'll kill him and Piper and... Good, Octavian yelled. They're traitors, all traitors. Listen to me. Will tried again. This is not what Apollo would want. Besides, your robes are... You know nothing, Gracchus. Octavian wrapped his hand around the release lever. I must act before they get any higher. Only an onager such as this can make the shot. I will single-handedly... Centurion, said a voice behind him. From the back of the siege engine, Michael Cahail appeared. He had a large red knot on his forehead where Tyson had knocked him unconscious. He stumbled as he walked, but somehow he found his way here from the shore, and along the way he picked up a sword and shield. Michael? Octavian shrieked with glee. Excellent! Guard me while I fire this onager. Then we will kill these Greci together. Michael Cahail took on in the scene. His boss's robes tangled in the trigger rope. Octavian's jewellery fuming from proximity to the imperial gold ammunition. He glanced up at the dragon, now high in the air, surrounded by rings of storm clouds like the circles of an archery target. Then he scowled at Nico. Nico readied his own sword. Surely Michael Cahail would warn his leader to step away from the onager. Surely he would attack. Are you certain, Octavian? Asked the son of Venus. Yes. Are you absolutely certain? Yes, you fool. I will be remembered as the saviour of Rome. Now keep them away while I destroy Gaia. Octavian. Don't, Will pleaded. We can't allow you. Will, Nico said. We can't stop him. Solace stared at him in disbelief, but Nico remembered his father's words in the Chapel of Bones. Some deaths cannot be prevented. Octavian's eyes gleamed. That's right, son of Pluto. You are helpless to stop me. It is my destiny. Cahail, stand guard. As you wish. Michael moved in front of the machine, interposing himself between Octavian and the two Greek demigods. Centurion, do what you must. Octavian turned to release the catch. A good friend to the last. Nico almost lost his nerve. If the onager really did fire true, if it scored a hit on Festus the dragon, and Nico allowed his friends to be hurt or killed. But he stayed where he was. For once, he decided to trust the wisdom of his father. Some deaths should not be prevented. Goodbye, Gaia, Octavian yelled. Goodbye, Jason Grace, the traitor. Octavian cut the release wire with his auger's knife, and he disappeared. The catapult arm sprang upward faster than Nico's eye could follow, launching Octavian along with the ammunition. The auger's screen faded until he was simply part of the fiery comet soaring skyward. Goodbye, Octavian, Michael Cahail said. He glared at Will and Nico one last time, as if daring them to speak. Then he turned his back and trudged away. Nico could have lived with Octavian's end. He might even have said good riddance. But his heart sank as the comet kept gaining altitude. It disappeared into the storm clouds, and the sky exploded in a dome of fire. Chapter 54. Nico. The next day, there weren't many answers. After the explosion, Piper and Jason, free-falling and unconscious, were plucked out of the sky by giant eagles and brought to safety. But Leo did not reappear. The entire Hephaestus cabin scoured the valley, finding bits and pieces of the Argo II's broken hull, but no sign of Festus the dragon or his master. All the monsters had been destroyed or scattered. Greek and Roman casualties were heavy, but not nearly as bad as they might have been. Overnight, the satyrs and nymphs disappeared into the woods for a convocation of the Cloven Elders. In the morning, Grover Underwood reappeared to announce that they could not sense the Earth Mother's presence. Nature was more or less back to normal. Apparently, Jason, Piper and Leo's plan had worked. Gaia had been separated from her source of power, charmed to sleep and then atomized in the combined explosion of Leo's fire and Octavian's man-made comet. An immortal could never die, But now Gaia would be like her husband, Uranus. The Earth would continue to function as normal, just as the sky did, but Gaia was now so dispersed and powerless that she could never again form a consciousness. At least, that was the hope. Octavian would be remembered for saving Rome by hurling himself into the sky in a fiery ball of death, but it was Leo Valdez who had made the real sacrifice. The victory celebration at camp was muted, due to grief, not just for Leo but also for the many others who had died in battle. Shrouded demigods, both Greek and Roman, were burned at the campfire, and Chiron asked Nico to oversee the burial rites. Nico agreed immediately. He was grateful for the opportunity to honour the dead. Even the hundreds of spectators didn't bother him. The hardest part was afterwards, when Nico and the 6 demigods from the Argo II met on the porch of the big house. Jason hung his head, even his glasses lost in shadow. "We should have been there at the end. We could have helped Leo." "It's not right," Piper agreed, wiping away her tears. "All that work, getting the physician's cure for nothing." Hazel broke down crying. "Piper, where's the cure? Bring it out." Bewildered, Piper reached into her belt pouch. She produced the chamois cloth package, but when she unfolded the cloth, it was empty. All eyes turned to Hazel. "How?" Annabeth asked. Frank put his arm around Hazel. "In Delos, Leo pulled the 2 of us aside. He pleaded with us to help him." Through her tears, Hazel explained how she had switched the physician's cure for an illusion, a trick of the mist, so that Leo could keep the real vial. Frank told them about Leo's plan to destroy a weakened Gaia with one massive fiery explosion. After talking with Nike and Apollo, Leo had been certain that such an explosion would kill any mortal within a quarter of a mile, so he knew he would have to get far away from everyone. He wanted to do it alone, Frank said. He thought there would be a slim chance that he, as son of Hephaestus, could survive the fire, but if anyone was with him. He said that Hazel and I, being Roman, would understand about sacrifice, but he knew the rest of you would never allow it. At first, the others looked angry, like they wanted to scream and throw things, but as Frank and Hazel talked, the group's rage seemed to dissipate. It was hard to be mad at Frank and Hazel when they were both crying. Also, the plan sounded exactly like the sneaky, twisted, ridiculously annoying and noble sort of thing Leo Valdez would do. Finally, Piper let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. "If he were here right now, I would kill him. How was he planning to take the cure? He was alone." "Maybe he found a way," Percy said. "This is Leo we're talking about. He might come back any minute, then we can take turns strangling him." Nico and Hazel exchanged looks. They both knew better, but they said nothing. The next day, the second since the battle, Romans and Greeks worked side by side to clean up the war zone and tend the wounded. Blackjack the Pegasus was recovering nicely from his arrow wound. Guido had decided to adopt Raina as his human. Reluctantly, Lou Ellen had agreed to turn her new pet piglets back into Romans. Will Solis hadn't spoken with Nico since the encounter at the Onager. The son of Apollo spent most of his time in the infirmary, but whenever Nico saw him running across camp to fetch more medical supplies or make a house call on some wounded demigod, he felt a strange twinge of melancholy. No doubt Will Solis thought Nico was a monster now for letting Octavian kill himself. The Romans bivouacked next to the strawberry fields, where they insisted on building their standard field camp. The Greeks pitched in to help them raise the earthen walls and dig the trenches. Nico had never seen anything stranger or cooler. Dakota shared Kool-Aid with the kids from the Dionysus cabin. The children of Hermes and Mercury laughed and told stories and brazenly stole things from just about everyone. Raina, Annabeth and Piper were inseparable, roaming the camp as a trio to check the progress of the repairs. Chiron, escorted by Frank and Hazel, inspected the Roman troops and praised them for their bravery. By evening, the general mood had improved somewhat. The dining hall pavilion had never been so crowded. The Romans were welcomed like old friends. Coach Hedge roamed around the demigods, beaming and holding his baby boy and saying, "Hey, you want to meet Chuck? This is my boy Chuck." The Aphrodite and Athena girls alike cooed over the feisty little satyr baby, who waved his pudgy fists, kicked his tiny hooves and bleated, Clarice, who had been named the baby's godmother, trailed behind the coach like a bodyguard and occasionally muttered, all right, give the kid some space." At announcement time, Chiron stepped forward and raised his goblet. "Out of every tragedy," he said, "comes new strength. Today we thank the gods for this victory. To the gods." The demigods all joined the toast, but their enthusiasm seemed muted. Nico understood the feeling. "We saved the gods again, and now we're supposed to thank them?" Then Chiron said, "And to new friends." To new friends. Hundreds of demigod voices echoed across the hills. At the campfire, everyone kept looking at the stars, as if they expected Leo to come back in some dramatic last-minute surprise. Maybe he'd swoop in, jump off Festus's back, and launch into corny jokes. It didn't happen. After a few songs, Raina and Frank were called to the front. They got a thunderous round of applause from both the Greeks and Romans. Up on Half-Blood Hill, the Athena Parthenos glowed more brightly in moonlight, as if to signal, "These kids are all right." "Tomorrow," Raina said, "we Romans must return home. We appreciate your hospitality, especially since we almost killed you." "You almost got killed," Annabeth corrected. "Whatever, Chase." "Ooh," the crowd said as one. Then everybody started laughing and pushing each other around. Even Nico had to smile. Anyway, Frank took over. Raina and I agree this marks a new era of friendship between the camps. Raina clapped him on the back. "That's right, for hundreds of years, the gods tried to separate us, to keep us from fighting. But there's a better kind of peace. Cooperation." Piper stood up from the audience. "Are you sure your mum is a war goddess?" "Yes, McLean," Raina said. "I still intend to fight a lot of battles, but from now on, we fight together." That got a big cheer. Zhang raised his hand for quiet. "You'll all be welcome at Camp Jupiter. We've come to an agreement with Chiron, a free exchange between the camps, weekend visits, training programs, and of course emergency aid in times of need." "And parties?" asked Dakota. "Hear, hear," said Connor Stoll. Raina spread her arms. "That goes without saying. We Romans invented parties." Another big whoa. "So, thank you," Raina concluded. "All of you. We could have chosen hatred and war. Instead, we found acceptance and friendship." Then she did something so unexpected, Nico would later think he dreamed it. She walked up to Nico, who was standing to one side in the shadows as usual. She grabbed his hand and pulled him gently into the firelight. "We had one home," she said. "Now we have two." She gave Nico a big hug, and the crowd roared with approval. For once, Nico didn't feel like pulling away. He buried his face in Raina's shoulder and blinked the tears out of his eyes. Chapter 55. Nico. That night, Nico slept in the Hades cabin. He'd never had any desire to use the place before, but now he shared it with Hazel, which made all the difference. It made him happy to live with a sister again, even if it was only for a few days, and even if Hazel insisted on partitioning her side of the room with sheets for privacy so it looked like a quarantine zone. Just before curfew, Frank came to visit and spent a few minutes talking with Hazel in hushed tones. Nico tried to ignore them. He stretched out in his bunk, which resembled a coffin, a polished mahogany frame, brass railings, blood-red velvet pillows and blankets. Nico hadn't been present when they built this cabin. He definitely had not suggested these bunks. Apparently somebody thought the children of Hades were vampires, not demigods. Finally, Frank knocked on the wall next to Nico's bed. Nico looked over. Zhang stood so tall now. He seemed so Roman. "Hey," Frank said. "We'll be leaving in the morning. Just wanted to tell you thanks." Nico sat up in his bunk. "You did great, Frank. It's been an honour." Frank smiled. "Honestly, I'm kind of surprised I lived through it. The whole magic firewood thing." Nico nodded. Hazel had told him all about the piece of firewood that controlled Frank's lifeline. Nico took it as a good sign that Frank could talk about it openly now. "I can't see the future," Nico told him, "but I can often tell when people are close to death. You're not. I don't know when that piece of firewood will burn up. Eventually, we all run out of firewood. But it won't be soon, Praetor Zhang. You and Hazel, you've got a lot more adventures ahead of you. You're just getting started. Be good to my sister, okay?" Hazel walked up next to Frank and laced her hand with his. "Nico, you're not threatening my boyfriend, are you?" The two of them looked so comfortable together it made Nico glad, but it also caused an ache in his heart, a ghostly pain, like an old war wound throbbing in bad weather. "No need for threats," Nico said. "Frank's a good guy. Or bear, or bulldog, or—" "Oh, stop," Hazel laughed. Then she kissed Frank. "See you in the morning." "Yeah," Frank said. "Nico, you sure you won't come with us? You'll always have a place in New Rome." "Thanks, Praetor," Raina said. "The same thing, but no. I hope I'll see you again." "Oh, you will," Nico promised. "I'm going to be the flower boy at your wedding, right?" Frank got flustered, cleared his throat and shuffled off, running into the door jamb on the way out. Hazel crossed her arms. You just had to tease him about that. She sat on Nico's bunk. For a while they just stayed there in comfortable silence. Siblings, children from the past, children of the underworld. "I'm going to miss you," Nico said. Hazel leaned over and rested her head on his shoulder. "You too, big brother. You will visit." He tapped the new officer's badge that gleamed on her shirt. Centurion of the 5th cohort now. Congratulations. Are there rules against centurions dating praetors? Shh, Hazel said. It'll be a lot of work getting the Legion back in shape, repairing the damage Octavian did. Dating regulations will be the least of my worries. You've come so far. You're not the same girl I brought to Camp Jupiter. Your power of the mist, your confidence. It's all thanks to you. No, Nico said. Getting a second life is one thing. Making it a better life, that's the trick. As soon as he said it, Nico realised he could have been talking about himself. He decided not to bring that up. Hazel sighed. A second life. I just wish... She didn't need to finish her thought. For the past 2 days, Leo's disappearance had hovered like a cloud over the whole camp. Hazel and Nico had been reluctant to join the speculation about what had happened to him. You felt his death, didn't you? Hazel's eyes were watery. Her voice was small. Yeah, Nico admitted. But I don't know, Hazel. Something about it was... different. He couldn't have taken the physician's cure. Nothing could have survived that explosion. I thought I was helping Leo. I messed up. No, it is not your fault. But Nico wasn't quite so ready to forgive himself. He'd spent the last 48 hours replaying the scene with Octavian at the catapult, wondering if he'd done the wrong thing. Perhaps the explosive power of that projectile had helped destroy Gaia, or perhaps it had unnecessarily cost Leo Valdez his life. I just wish he hadn't died alone, Hazel murmured. There was no one with him, no one to give him that cure. There's not even a body to bury. Her voice broke. Nico put his arm around her. He held her as she wept. Eventually she fell asleep from exhaustion. Nico tucked her into his own bed and kissed her forehead. Then he went to the shrine of Hades in the corner, a little table decorated with bones and jewels. I suppose, he said, there's a first time for everything. He knelt and prayed silently for his father's guidance. Chapter 56. Nico. At dawn he was still awake when someone rapped at the door. He turned, registering a face with blonde hair, and for a split second he thought it was Will Solis. When Nico realised it was Jason, he was disappointed. Then he felt angry with himself for feeling that way. He hadn't talked to Will since the battle. The Apollo kids had been too busy with the injured. Besides, Will probably blamed Nico for what happened to Octavian. Why wouldn't he? Nico had basically permitted, whatever that was, murder by consensus, a gruesome suicide. By now, Will Solis realised just how creepy and revolting Nico D'Angelo was. Of course, Nico didn't care what he thought, but still. You okay? Jason asked. You look... Fine, Nico snapped, and then he softened his tone. If you're looking for Hazel, she's still asleep. Jason mouthed, oh, and gestured for Nico to come outside. Nico stepped into the sunlight, blinking and disoriented. Perhaps the cabin's designers had been right about the children of Hades being like vampires. He was not a morning person. Jason didn't look as though he'd slept any better. His hair had a cowlick on one side, and his new glasses sat crookedly on his nose. Nico resisted the urge to reach out and straighten them. Jason pointed to the strawberry fields, where the Romans were breaking camp. It was strange to see them here. Now it'll be strange not seeing them. Do you regret not going with them? Nico asked. Jason's smile was lopsided. A little, but I'll be going back and forth between the camps a lot. I have some shrines to build. I heard. The Senate plans to elect you the Pontifex Maximus. Jason shrugged. I don't care about the title so much. I do care about making sure the gods are remembered. I don't want them fighting out of jealousy anymore, or taking out their frustrations on demigods. They're gods, Nico said. That's their nature. Maybe, but I can try to make it better. I guess Leo would say I'm acting like a mechanic, doing preventative maintenance. Nico sensed Jason's sorrow like an oncoming storm. You know, you couldn't have stopped Leo. There's nothing you could have done differently. He knew what had to happen. I guess. I don't suppose you can tell if he's still... He's gone, Nico said. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but I sensed his death. Jason stared into the distance. Nico felt guilty for squashing his hopes. He was almost tempted to mention his own doubts. What a different sensation Leo's death had given him, as if Leo's soul had invented its own way into the underworld, something that involved a lot of gears, levers, and steam-powered pistons. Nevertheless, Nico was sure Leo Valdez had died, and death was death. It wouldn't be fair to give Jason false expectations. In the distance, the Romans were picking up their gear and toting it across the hill. On the other side, so Nico had heard, a fleet of black SUVs waited to transport the Legion cross-country back to California. Nico guessed that would be an interesting road trip. He imagined the entire 12th Legion in the drive-through lane at Burger King. He imagined some hapless monster terrorizing a random demigod in Kansas, only to find itself surrounded by several dozen carloads of heavily armoured Romans. Ella the Harpy is going with them, Jason said. She and Tyson, even Rachel Elizabeth Dare. They're going to work together to try to reconstruct the Sibylline books. That should be interesting. Could take years, Jason said, but with the voice of Delphi extinguished. Rachel still can't see the future? Jason shook his head. I wish I knew what happened to Apollo in Athens. Maybe Artemis will get him out of trouble with Zeus and the power of prophecy will work again. But for now, those Sibylline books might be our only way to get guidance for quests. Personally, Nico said, I could do without prophecies or quests for a while. You've got a point. He straightened his glasses. Look, Nico, the reason I wanted to talk to you, I know what you said back at Auster's Palace. I know you already turned down a place at Camp Jupiter. I probably can't change your mind about leaving Camp Half-Blood, but I have to. I'm staying. Jason blinked. What? A Camp Half-Blood? The Hades cabin needs a head counselor. Have you seen the decor? It's disgusting. I'll have to renovate. And someone needs to do the burial rites properly, since demigods insist on dying heroically. That's fantastic, dude. Jason opened his arms for a hug and then froze. Right, no touching, sorry. Nico grunted. I suppose we can make an exception. Jason squeezed him so hard, Nico thought his ribs would crack. Oh man, Jason said. Wait till I tell Piper. Hey, since I'm all alone in my cabin too, you and I can share a table in the dining hall. We can team up for Capture the Flag and sing-along contests and... Are you trying to scare me away? Sorry, whatever you say, Nico. I'm just glad. The funny thing was, Nico believed him. Nico happened to glance towards the cabins and saw someone waving at him. Will Solis stood in the doorway of the Apollo cabin, a stern look on his face. He pointed to the ground at his feet, like, you, here, now. Jason, Nico said, would you excuse me? So, where were you? Will demanded. He was wearing a green surgeon's shirt with jeans and flip-flops, which was probably not standard hospital protocol. What do you mean? Nico asked. I've been stuck in the infirmary for like 2 days. You don't come by, you don't offer to help. I what? Why would you want a son of Hades in the same room with people you're trying to heal? Why would anyone want that? You can't help out a friend? Maybe cut bandages, bring me a soda or a snack, or just a simple, how's it going, Will? You don't think I could stand to see a friendly face? What, my face? The words simply didn't make sense together. Friendly face, Nico D'Angelo. You're so dense, Will noted. I hope you got over that nonsense about leaving Camp Half-Blood. I did. I mean, I'm staying. Good. So you may be dense, but you're not an idiot. How can you even talk to me like that? Don't you know I can summon zombies and skeletons and... Right now you couldn't summon a wishbone without melting into a puddle of darkness, D'Angelo, Will said. I told you. No more underworldly stuff. Doctor's orders. You owe me at least 3 days of rest in the infirmary. Starting now. Nico felt like 100 skeletal butterflies were resurrecting in his stomach. 3 days? I suppose that would be okay. Good. Now. A loud whoop cut through the air. Over by the earth, the hearth in the centre of the common, Percy was grinning at something Annabeth had just told him. Annabeth laughed and playfully slapped his arm. I'll be right back, Nico told Will. Promise on the sticks and everything? He walked over to Percy and Annabeth, who were both still grinning like crazy. Hey man, Percy said. Annabeth just told me some good news. Sorry if I got a little loud. We're going to spend our senior year together, Annabeth explained, here in New York. And after graduation. College in New Rome. Percy pumped his fist like he was blowing a truck horn. 4 years with no monsters to fight, no battles, no stupid prophecies. Just me and Annabeth getting our degrees, hanging out at cafes, enjoying California. And after that, Annabeth kissed Percy on the cheek. Well, Rainer and Frank said we could live in New Rome as long as we like. That's great, Nico said. He was a little surprised to find that he meant it. I'm staying too, here at Camp Half-Blood. Awesome, Percy said. Nico studied his face, his sea-green eyes, his grin, his ruffled black hair. Somehow Percy Jackson seemed like a regular guy now, not a mythical figure, not someone to idolise or crush on. So, Nico said, since we're going to be spending at least a year seeing each other at camp, I think I should clear the air. Percy's smile wavered. What do you mean? For a long time, Nico said, I had a crush on you. I just wanted you to know. Percy looked at Nico, then at Annabeth, as if to check that he'd heard correctly, then back at Nico. Yeah, Nico said. You're a great person, but I'm over that. I'm happy for you guys. So you mean, right. Annabeth's grey eyes started to sparkle. She gave Nico a sideways smile. Wait, Percy said. So you mean, Right, Nico said again. But it's cool. We're cool. I mean, I see now. You're cute, but you're not my type. I'm not your type? Wait, so... See you around, Percy, Nico said. Annabeth. She raised her hand for a high five. Nico obliged. Then he walked back across the green to where Will Solace was waiting. Chapter 57. Piper. Piper wished she could charm herself to sleep. It may have worked on Gaia, but for the last 2 nights she'd hardly slept a wink. The days were fine. She loved being back with her friends, Lacey and Mitchell and all the other Aphrodite kids. Even her bratty second-in-command, Drew Tanaka, seemed relieved, probably because Piper could run things and give Drew more time for gossip and in-cabin beauty treatments. Piper kept busy helping Raina and Annabeth coordinate between the Greeks and Romans. To Piper's surprise, the other 2 girls valued her skills as a go-between to smooth over any conflicts. There weren't many, but Piper did manage to return some Roman helmets that mysteriously made their way into the camp store. She also kept a fight from breaking out between the children of Mars and the children of Ares over the best way to kill a Hydra. On the morning the Romans were scheduled to leave, Piper was sitting on the pier at the canoe lake, trying to placate the naiads. Some of the lake spirits thought the Roman guys were so hot that they too wanted to leave for Camp Jupiter. They were demanding a giant portable fish tank for the journey west. Piper had just concluded negotiations when Raina found her. The praetor sat next to her on the dock. Hard work? Piper blew a strand of hair out of her eyes. Naiads can be challenging. I think we have a deal. If they still want to go at the end of the summer, we'll work out the details then, but Naiads tend to forget things in about 5 seconds. Raina traced her fingertips across the water. Sometimes I wish I could forget things that quickly. Piper studied the praetor's face. Raina was one demigod who hadn't seemed to change during the War of the Giants, at least not on the outside. She still had the same strong, unstoppable gaze, the same regal, beautiful face. She wore her armour and purple cloak as easily as most people would wear shorts and a t-shirt. Piper couldn't understand how anyone could take so much pain, shoulder so much responsibility without breaking. She wondered if Raina ever had anyone to confide in. You did so much, Piper said. For both camps. Without you, none of it would have been possible. All of us played a part. Sure, but you, I just wish you got more credit. Raina laughed gently. Thank you, Piper. But I don't want attention. You understand what that's like, don't you? Piper did. They were so different, but she understood not wanting to attract attention. Piper had wished for that her whole life. With her dad's fame, the paparazzi, the photos and scandal stories in the press. She met so many people who said, "Oh, I want to be famous. That would be so great." But they had no idea what it was really like. She'd seen the toll it took on her father. Piper wanted nothing to do with it. She could understand the appeal of the Roman way, too. To blend in, be one of a team, work as part of a well-oiled machine. Even so, Raina had risen to the top. She couldn't stay hidden. Your power from your mum, Piper said. You can lend strength to others. Raina pursed her lips. Nico told you? No, I just sensed it. Watching you lead the Legion, that must drain you. How do you, get that strength back? When I get the strength back, I'll let you know. She said it like a joke, but Piper sensed the sadness behind her words. You're always welcome here, Piper said. If you need to take a break, get away. You've got Frank now. He could assume more responsibility for a while. It might do you good to make time for yourself when nobody is going to be looking at you as a praetor. Raina met her eyes, as if trying to gauge how serious the offer was. Would I be expected to sing that odd song about how Grandma puts on her armour? Not unless you really want to, but we might have to ban you from Capture the Flag. I have a feeling you could go against the entire camp solo and still beat us. Raina smirked. I'll consider the offer, thank you. She adjusted her dagger, and for a moment Piper thought about her own blade, Catoptris, which was now locked in her hope chest in her cabin. Ever since Athens, when she used the blade to stab the giant Enceladus, its visions had stopped completely. I wonder, Raina said. You're a child of Venus. Aphrodite. Perhaps you could explain something your mother said. I'm honoured, I'll try, but I have to warn you, my mum doesn't make sense to me a lot of the time. Once in Charleston, Venus told me something. She said, you will not find love where you wish or where you hope. No demigod shall heal your heart. I've struggled with that for... Her words broke. Piper had a strong urge to find her mother and punch her. She hated how Aphrodite can mess up someone's life with just a short conversation. Raina, she said. I don't know what she meant, but I do know this. You're an incredible person. There is someone out there for you. Maybe it's not a demigod, maybe it's a mortal, or I don't know, but when it's meant to happen, it will. And until it does, hey, you have friends, lots of friends, both Greek and Roman. The thing about you being everyone's source of strength, sometimes you might forget that you need to draw strength from others. I'm here for you. Raina stared across the lake. Piper McLean, you have a way with words. I'm not charm speaking, I promise. No charm speak required. Raina offered her hand. I have a feeling we'll see each other again. They shook, and after Raina left, Piper knew that Raina was right. They would meet again because Raina was no longer a rival, no longer a stranger or a potential enemy. She was a friend. She was family. That night the camp felt empty without the Romans. Piper already missed Hazel. She missed the creaking timbers of the Argo II and the constellations her lamp used to make against the ceiling of her cabin aboard the ship. Lying in her bunk in cabin 10, she felt so restless she knew she wouldn't be able to doze off. She kept thinking about Leo. Again and again she replayed what had happened in the fight against Gaia, trying to figure out how she could have failed Leo so badly. Around 2 a.m, she gave up trying to sleep. She sat up in bed and gazed out of the window. Moonlight turned the woods silver. The smells of the sea and the strawberry fields wafted on the breeze. She couldn't believe that just a few days ago the Earth Mother had awoken and almost destroyed everything Piper held dear. Tonight seemed so peaceful, so normal. Tap, tap, tap. Piper nearly hit the top of her bunk. Jason was standing outside the window, rapping on the frame. He grinned. Come on. What are you doing here? She whispered. It's after curfew. The patrol harpies will shred you. Just come on. Her heart racing, she took his hand and climbed out of the window. He led her to cabin 1 and took her inside, where the huge statue of Hippie Zeus glowered in the dim light. Jason, what exactly? Check it out. He showed her one of the marble columns that ringed the circular chamber. On the back, almost hidden against the wall, iron rungs led upward. A ladder. Can't believe I didn't notice this sooner. Wait till you see. He began to climb. Piper wasn't sure why she felt so nervous, but her hands were shaking. She followed him up. At the top, Jason pushed open a small trapdoor. They emerged on the side of a domed roof, on a flat ledge facing north. The whole of Long Island Sound spread out to the horizon. They were so far up and at such an angle that nobody below could possibly see them. The patrol harpies never flew this high. Look. Jason pointed at the stars, which made a splash of diamonds across the sky. Better jewels than even Hazel Levesque could have summoned. Beautiful. Piper snuggled up against Jason, and he put his arm around her. But aren't you going to get into trouble? Who cares? Jason asked. Piper laughed quietly. Who are you? He turned, his glasses pale bronze in starlight. Jason Grace. Pleased to meet you. He kissed her and, okay, they had kissed before, but this was different. Piper felt like a toaster, all her coils heated to red hot. Any more warmth and she'd start smelling like burnt toast. Jason pulled away enough to look in her eyes. That night at the wilderness school, our first kiss under the stars. The memory, Piper said. The one that never happened. Well, now it's real. He made the ward against evil symbol, the same one he used to dispel his mother's ghost, and pushed at the sky. From this point on, we're writing our own story, with a fresh start, and we just had our first kiss. I'm afraid to tell you this after just one kiss, Piper said, but gods of Olympus, I love you. Love you too, Pipes. She didn't want to ruin the moment, but she couldn't stop thinking of Leo, and how he would never have a fresh start. Jason must have sensed her feelings. Hey, he said, Leo is okay. How can you believe that? He didn't get the cure. Nico said he died. You once woke up a dragon with just your voice, Jason reminded her. You believed the dragon should be alive, right? Yes, but we have to believe in Leo. There is no way he would die so easily. He's a tough guy. Right. Piper tried to steady her heart. So we believe. Leo has to be alive. You remember the time in Detroit when he flattened Ma Gasket with a car engine? Or those dwarfs in Bologna? Leo took them down with a homemade smoke grenade made from toothpaste. Commander Toolbelt, Jason said. Bad boy supreme, Piper said. Chef Leo, that tofu taco expert. They laughed and told stories about Leo Valdez, their best friend. They stayed on the roof until dawn broke, and Piper started to believe they could have a fresh start. It might even be possible to tell a new story in which Leo was still out there, somewhere. Chapter 58. Leo. Leo was dead. He knew that with absolute certainty. He just didn't understand why it hurt so much. He felt like every cell in his body had exploded. Now his consciousness was trapped inside a charred, crispy husk of demigod roadkill. The nausea was worse than any car sickness he'd ever had. He couldn't move, he couldn't see or hear, he could only feel pain. He started to panic, thinking maybe this was his eternal punishment. Then somebody put jumper cables on his brain and restarted his life. He gasped and sat up. The first thing he felt was the wind in his face, then the searing pain in his right arm. He was still on Festus's back, still in the air. His eyes started to work again, and he noticed the large hypodermic needle retracting from his forearm. The empty injector buzzed, whirred and retreated into a panel on Festus's neck. "Thanks, buddy," Leo groaned. "Man, being dead sucked, but that physician's cure, that stuff is worse." Festus clicked and clattered in Morse code. "No, man, I'm not serious," Leo said. "I'm glad to be alive, and yeah, I love you too. You did awesome." A metallic purr ran the length of the dragon's body. First things first, Leo scanned the dragon for signs of damage. Festus's wings were working properly, though his left medius membrane was shot full of holes. His neck plating was partially fused, melted from the explosion, but the dragon didn't seem to be in danger of crashing immediately. Leo tried to remember what had happened. He was pretty sure he had defeated Gaia, but he had no idea how his friends were doing back at Camp Half-Blood. Hopefully Jason and Piper had got clear of the blast. Leo had a weird memory of a missile hurtling towards them and screaming like a little girl. What the heck had that been about? Once he landed, he'd have to check Festus's underbelly. The most dangerous, serious damage would probably be in that area, where the dragon had courageously grappled with Gaia while they blowtorched the sludge out of her. There was no telling how long Festus had been aloft. He'd need to get set down soon. Which raised the question, where were they? Below was a solid white blanket of clouds. The sun shone directly overhead in a brilliant blue sky. So it was about noon. But of which day? How long had Leo been dead? He opened the access panel in Festus's neck. The astrolabe was humming away, the crystal pulsing like a neon heart. Leo checked his compass and GPS, and a grin spread across his face. "Festus, good news," he shouted. "Our navigation readings are completely messed up." Festus said, "Creek. Yeah, descend. Get us below these clouds and maybe..." The dragon plummeted so fast that the breath was sucked out of Leo's lungs. They broke through the blanket of white, and there below them was a single green island, a vast blue sea. Leo whooped so loudly they probably heard him in China. "Yeah, who died? Who came back? Who's your freaking supersized McShizzle now, baby? Woohoo!" They spiraled towards Aegea. The warm wind in Leo's hair. He realised his clothes were in tatters, despite the magic they'd been woven with. His arms were covered in a fine layer of soot, like he'd just died in a massive fire, which, of course, he had. But he couldn't worry about any of that. She was standing on the beach, wearing jeans and a white blouse, her amber hair pulled back. Festus spread his wings and landed with a stumble. Apparently one of his legs was broken. The dragon pitched sideways and catapulted Leo face first into the sand. So much for a heroic entrance. Leo spat a piece of seaweed out of his mouth. Festus dragged himself down the beach, made clacking noises that meant ow, ow, ow. Leo looked up. Calypso stood over him, her arms crossed, her eyebrows arched. "You're late," she announced. Her eyes gleamed. "Sorry, sunshine," Leo said. "Traffic was murder." "You're covered with soot," she noted, "and you managed to ruin the clothes I made for you, which were impossible to ruin." "Well, you know," Leo shrugged. Somebody had released 100 Pachico balls in his chest. "I'm all about doing the impossible." She offered her hand and helped him up. They stood nose to nose as she studied his condition. She smelled like cinnamon. Had she always had that tiny freckle next to her left eye? Leo really wanted to touch it. She wrinkled her nose. "You smell, I know, like I've been dead. Probably because I have been. Oath to keep with final breath and all, but I'm better now." She stopped him with a kiss. The pachinko balls slammed around inside him. He felt so happy he had to make a conscious effort not to burst into flames. When she finally let him go, her face was covered in soot smudges. She didn't seem to care. She traced her thumb across his cheekbone. "Leo Valdez," she said. Nothing else, just his name, as if it was something magical. "That's me," he said, his voice ragged. "So, you want to get off this island?" Calypso stepped back. She raised one hand and the wind swirled. Her invisible servants brought 2 suitcases and set them at her feet. "What gave you that idea?" Leo grinned. "Packed for a long trip, huh?" "I don't plan on coming back." Calypso glanced over her shoulder at the path that led to her garden and her cavern home. "Where will you take me, Leo?" "Somewhere to fix my dragon first," he decided, "and then Wherever you want. How long was I gone, seriously? Time is difficult on Aegea, Calypso said. Felt like forever. Leo had a stab of doubt. He hoped his friends were okay. He hoped 100 years hadn't passed while he was flying around dead and Festus searched for Aegea. He would have to find out. He needed to let Jason and Piper and the others know he was okay. But right now, priorities. Calypso was a priority. So once you leave Aegea, he said, do you stay immortal or what? I have no idea. And you're okay with that? More than okay. Well then, he turned towards his dragon. Buddy, you up for another fight or flight to nowhere in particular? Festus blew fire and limped around. So, we take off with no plan, Calypso said. No idea where we'll go or what problems await beyond this island. Many questions and no tidy answers. Leo turned up his palms. That's how I fly, sunshine. Can I get your bags? Absolutely. 5 minutes later, with Calypso's arms around his waist, Leo spurred Festus into flight. The bronze dragon spread his wings, and they soared into the unknown. And that is the end of The Blood of Olympus, Heroes of Olympus by Rick Riordan. Really hope you've enjoyed this story, guys, and this entire series, voiced by myself, James Dobinson. Thank you, guys. I'll be back soon with lots more to come.